Thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. There's chesed learning. We should have the base of English immediately. Everyone should be well. Everyone should be safe. If I'm not mistaken, we were holding by Ela Marava Almana Min Eretz Sinami Asev Alaysasehu. Is that correct? Naftali would tell me exactly where I ended. Oh no, we did the next one. We're up to Ela Marava Gzeir Almana Min Eretz Sinat Almana Min Eretz. Okay. So let me just go over what happened and then we'll finish. Whenever it says Ella, it's retracting from an answer and it's going to say another answer. Ella, the word Ella means we have to take away what we said before. We're going to go back. So what we had a question because we said that Almana, a widow, to the Kohen Gadol is forbidden. And so therefore, you have to do chalitza. The Kohen Gadol would have to do chalitza on his brother's wife. He wouldn't be able to do yibum. So we said that that's clearly acceptable, that statement, if the brother was married to this woman. But let's say the brother was only betrothed to this woman. Why would yibum not be acceptable? Yibum is a mitzvah saseh. And there's no problem of Isha bibsula yikach, that he has to marry a virgin, which is another mitzvah saseh, because she is a virgin. The only problem is that almana, you shouldn't marry a widow. So I say is say let him marry, to let him do yibam. So we gave answer number one was we learned from a pasuk Yevimta that says that there's one type of yevama that doesn't do yibam. It only does chalitza, even though chalitza was like a second option for yibam. But here, there is no option for yibam. We learned from a pasuk. We had a bunch of questions on that. Apparently, yibam would work if you would do yibam. So came along Rava and says, there's an asay as well, not to marry this woman that's only betrothed, not that the Kohen Gadol to marry her. Why? Because it says, "V'skadishtem yisim kadoshim." You should be holy. It's a positive command. He can't marry her, so you would be violating a positive command if the Kohen Gadol would marry this widow. We had questions on that. So now where we're holding is Elam Marava Gezer Almana Min Eretz Sinat Almana Min Nesuin. Yeah, she was married to this Kohen Gadol's brother, and he did kedushin. But he never consummated the marriage. So that's the one with the regular one. Yeah, so she's still a virgin, and Kohen Gadol is not supposed to marry a woman that's a widow, but over here she's only a widow. So because of mitzvah yibum, we're suggesting that maybe that mitzvah is strong enough to push her. So we say it's a rabbinic decree. Mian is something else. Yeah. So we say it's a rabbinic decree. There's a decree. If we allow him to do yibam, if it's a widow from the Erison, he may end up doing yibam if it's a widow from the Nesuin. Yeah, you would assume that there'd be rabbis there that would explain this, but it's a decree. In the previous Gemaras, we've been always comparing that he's not allowed to marry, no one is allowed to marry a mamzer or a mamzeres. And it's a negative prohibition. The question is, should the rule of yibam push off the negative prohibition if his if his brother happened to be married to a mamzeres, and now it's a mitzvah yibam, it should push off the negative prohibition. So we said no. Earlier we had the answers for this, but we rejected all of those answers. Now we're left that it's a rabbinic decree. So why doesn't he do yibam back in this one case that got left out of this answer? So we say gezer b'makam mitzvah t'shlei b'makam mitzvah. If you allow him to marry a mamzeres when there's a mitzvah, he may say, well, so and so married a mamzeres. Even when it's not a mitzvah, he'll think he's allowed to. Elamayata, if that's the case, if you're worried about that scenario, so then then why are you allowing the mitzvah of yibam? You know that it's possible. When is yibam performed? if a person has a paternal brother that passes away, that's Yibum. And so, which is really his sister-in-law. He may end up marrying his sister-in-law from a maternal brother. So the Gemara says, Yibam benachla tel rachmana mediyadi. Everyone knows that it has to do with inheritance. No one's going to make that mistake. Inheritance is only from the paternal side. Isha shein labanim like this yabim. If you're starting to make decrees, you're worried about things. So maybe you shouldn't do Yibam on a woman that didn't have children. You may end up doing Yibam on a woman that did have children. It says, well, babanim tel rachmana mediyadi. That's the whole point. Everyone is going to know and not make that mistake. A brother that was around while the deceased was alive before he passed away shouldn't do Yibam, because maybe a brother that was only born afterwards is going to end up doing Yibam. It says, the Psukim people know. Okay. No one should do Yibam. Maybe there's going to be one of a woman is an islandess. She's not developed enough to be able to have children. That says leishricha. Don't worry about that. That's a anomaly. That's not a regular case. Mamzeres in the sina leishricha, nami leishricha. Mamzeres in the nami leishricha. So, if that's what our answer is, if that's what we're back to, then mamzeres is also not so common. What was our issue? We didn't want to do yibam on a mamzeres because maybe someone's going to think that b'makam mitzvah it's mutter. In a place where there's a mitzvah of Yibam, you're allowed to marry a mamzeres. You may think that you're allowed to marry a mamzeres in other cases also. So we said, no, that was a reason why not to do Yibam on a mamzeres, because it could come out that they may end up doing marrying when it's not a makkah mitzvah, when it's not a mitzvah there. So just like by the islandess, we said that it's not common for a woman to be in that so underdeveloped that she can't have children. So this is also not common. So what are you worried about? Elam Arava, we need another answer. Back to the Almana, to the Kayin Gadol. We say, Gzeir Bia Rishona to be a Shnia. You're right. They could live together. It's a mitzvah. They could be intimate. Yibam will push off the negative prohibition. But how often? Just the first time. That's the only mitzvah. After that, there's no mitzvah.
But if the mitzvah is to have the members of the
yeah. What's your name? What's your first name? Ellie. Ellie's asking a question. But if the mitzvah is l'hakam shemachiv, so what are you telling me that one time would be enough? I don't know. They're not really answering it. So that's the answer. That's so far. That's the answer. That we have a problem. He's allowed to live with her only once. We're afraid that he's going to live with her again if they're going to. Taisus mentions that maybe he can't even finish the relationship. He can only start because she would already be acquired just at the beginning of the intimacy. Tanya Nami Hachi, you have a brisa that says similar to this in Balu, that if he lived with, that if he did Yibam, if they were intimate, Sakanu, he acquires them. What's that? Bibiya Rishaina. That's with the first relationship. However, Vasalakaiman Miyashnia, but he's not allowed to keep them. That's referring to the second relationship. Sorry, he has to divorce, right? Hadam Marava Vitem Ravashi. Lav Milsi Damri. Then Rava says, and some say Ravashi says, that what we just said here, this teretz that we gave, that it would only be permissible for the first relationship, for the first intimacy, that's not really accurate. Why? Damar Rish Lakish, because Rish Lakish says, Kol makam shatamaytzi asay v'leisa say, imati yachal akayim shnei mutav. When do we say an asay is deicha leisa say? That's if you're not able to do the asay unless you violate the leis asay. If you're able to do the asay and not violate the leis asay, then great. V'im lav. If you're not able to, then yavay asay v'yitches leis asay. Then the asay pushes off the leis asay. However, over here, hachanami efshar b'chalitza makayim asay v'leis asay. He's able to fulfill the mitzvah. Do chalitza. The Gemara is going to say that in a moment. Very good. Yeah. Meisvei, Gemara has a question. If the real answer is that you're able to do both, so the asay doesn't push off the leis asay, why? Because do chalitza. So then, why does yibum work? If the asay pushes off the leis asay, then we can say that whatever reason we don't want you to do yibum, do chalitza, but yibum would work. But if the asay doesn't push off the leis asay because efshar l'kayim shneim, because you're able to do both by doing chalitza, then what's the pshat that if he does do yibum, he acquires her? Why does he acquire? He wasn't allowed to. It's a regular sister-in-law. Can't marry a sister-in-law. Sister-in-law is Yisr Karis. No? So how does it work? There should be no kedusha there. Okay, so Gemara has a question on that. Itmar. We have a statement which, when it says Itmar, it's a statement of Amirayim, which is usually a machlekes. It says, Bias kain gadol ba'almana. If a kain gadol marries his sister-in-law, his brother's widow, and his brother had other wives as well. There's other wives as well. So he didn't do chalitza, which was what was recommended. Instead, he did yibum. Yeah. Kasha for myself. It's a question on the story. That's what happened.
Okay.
Does he somehow get disqualified as Kohen Gadol for doing this?
I don't know. It's very difficult for a Kayan himself to get disqualified. Say the children could become the Kayan himself usually doesn't get sometimes we'll say you can't serve until he divorces her or something.
Oh,
But to be disqualified entirely, that I don't think it really happens.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So once the King of England he had a divorce, he had to either abdicate or marry a divorcee. He chose to abdicate.
Really?
Yeah, it's his Queen Elizabeth's father.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he abdicated because the country said, for the woman of my life, I give up the throne.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But maybe he got it from this tradition. I mean, he had to get it from somewhere.
Who's it? Which king?
Edward, I think. The king
I didn't know that.
Queen Elizabeth.
I didn't know that.
He's a Duke of Windsor.
Uh-huh. Yeah, tough choices.
The sector. Tough choices.
Bias kain gadol ba'almana. So it's a machlekes Rabbi Yechon and Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Yechon and Rabbi Lazar, these are sages in Eretz Yisrael. They lived in Tveria. Rabbi Yochanan, so the Gemara tells us, Chad Amar Eina Piteres Tzarasa, V'chan Amar Piteres Tzarasa. He wasn't supposed to do Yibam. He's supposed to do Chalitza, but he did Yibam. Is it effective that the other wives don't need Chalitza? Does it work at all that the other wives don't need Chalitza? So one says it works, and one says it doesn't work. We're on top of Daf Chafala. Everyone would agree. If his brother was married, fully married to this woman, so when he goes along, the brother, the Kohen Gadol brother, goes along and does Yibam on his sister-in-law, that was a clear prohibition, and the marriage is nothing. But Kipligi, where would the Machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar be? Balmana Menerisin. if his brother was only betrothed to this woman, so really she was still a virgin. So Mandamer Peteres, the one that says that the Yibam works and is effective, that you don't need chalitza for the other wives, for the rival wives. The asay, the positive command of the levirate marriage, pushes off the negative command that the Kohen Gadol should not marry a widow. Manda Marina Paiteris, the other opinion, it doesn't tell us who holds what. The asay does not push it off, because we could have done chalitza, which is what Rish Lakish told us before, that when you have an asay and a leisa say, we'll only push it off if it's impossible to fulfill both of them. But here it's possible to fulfill both. Meisvei. The Gemara has a question: how could you say that it's possible to fulfill both, and therefore that the yibam is nothing? The imbalu kanu. We learned before that it's effective. Huge question. Tiyufta. We asked this question before. We also said it tiyufta. Tiyufta means we don't have an answer. Why are you asking only on Rebbe Lazar? This is a question back on Rish Lakish. It's interesting. We had a tiyufta on Rish Lakish. I guess the Gemara didn't say tiyufta a second time. Amalach Rish Lakish says, Ki amina ana hechedim mekaymi mitzvah. Aval hacha chalitza b'makam yibam lav mitzvah is what Eli mentioned. Chalitza is not a real mitzvah. Chalitza is the way out of doing the mitzvah. It's the b'di'evet. What you're supposed to do is yibam. If you don't want to do yibam, so to avoid the yibam, which is the mitzvah, you can do chalitza. Chalitza is like a matir. It's not the mitzvah. So when do we say asay is not doicha aleis asay, when you're able to perform both the asay and the leisa? Here you're not performing the asay. You're avoiding the asay. You're not violating it, but you're not performing it. So Rish Lakish would say that the asay is still there. You have to do yibam. Okay. So far we're still on easy waters. One more piece.
Easy water. It's not another book.
One more piece until you'll have to put on your thinking caps. Amar Rava says, Remez l'shnias min haTorah minai. We mentioned that there's certain relationships, certain relatives that are only rabbinically forbidden. What's a hint, an allusion to that in the Torah? Shenemar ki es kol ha'toyeva Yisrael asu anshe aretz. Hoel means these, but hoel could also mean strong. It's talking about not to have these forbidden relationships. It says because this was done in Egypt, or was it anshe aretz? No, this was done in Canaan, I think. This was done in Canaan. Because all of these forbidden things the people of this land did. Ha'el, when it says these, kashes, that means that these are strict relationships. Mechlal de karakis, sounds like there's some that are softer, soft prohibitions. What did you call that? Misdemeanors. What are those? Shniyas. Those are these other relatives that are slightly more distant than the actual incest. How did you get from that ha'el means serious, severe? The strong people of the land took. Okay. Lema pligi de Rab Levi. This seems to argue with what Rab Levi says. Damar Rab Levi. Kasha in shul midas yes mentioned shalarayish. Zen nemar by an el. Zen nemar by ela. Rab Levi said that by Arias it says the word Ela. No. I say Ela, but I'm sorry. By the Ela, Ela is the stronger one than El. That's what we're learning over here. So he said, Rab Levi says that not being careful with weights and measures is more serious than adultery or incest. Why? Because this one by the weights and measures says Eila. That means that that's the severe one. But by Arias, it says El. I said, so the Gemara answers El Kasha ve'Ela Kasha Mel. You're right that weights and measures are more serious than Arias, but doesn't mean that Arias isn't severe. By Arias it says El, which means severe, serious. But by Arias it also says Eila. We have another pasuk. We call it Teves Eila b'nichrasu. It says Amul lemiti midis mikaris. That's coming to tell me that someone that isn't careful with his weights and measures, he tricks people, so he doesn't get karis. It's only by adultery or incest with his karis. So if the punishment isn't so severe, so what's Reb Levi telling me that it's so serious? Hani efshe b'tshuva, hani lo efshe b'tshuva. It's impossible to do tshuva if someone tricks people with weights and measures, because every day people are coming to the store. He tricks more and more people. It's impossible to resolve that. But someone can do tshuva if he had a forbidden relations. He can do tshuva, unless he gave birth to a child. Gave birth to a child, then that gets complicated. But otherwise, he can do tshuva.
So for weights and measures, usually in this society, you get a fine if they catch it. But the other one, adultery, is generally, or being a monster type.
It's looked at much more severe, and at least in our circles. But I don't know. I think the courts are sometimes a little surprising in their punishments when it comes to monetary things. You can get like huge, life sentences for these, I don't know what it is, trading of things, and
So,
for the government, they could be very serious, right? Okay. Here we're saying that it has to do with tshuva. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Mehacha. Rabbi Yehuda has another source. He weighed and he analyzed and he set up these mishalim, these parables. Amar Ula Amar Abalaza Kedim Shbashleima Hisa Taradem Lekfifa Shein Laznayim Acha Bashleim Vaslaznayim. Before Shlomo HaMelech came around, the Torah was like a basket that didn't have handles. He came around and now it has handles. You're able to carry it. This is referring to the rabbinic decrees that were instituted. Yeah, because of the rabbinic decrees, you're able to keep everything else. Those are the handles to the basket. Rabbi Shemar Mehacha. Rabbi Shemar says, Pereyu, avoid it. Al tavar by, don't pass by. Shata me'alav, go away from it. Vavar, and pass over. Amar Rav Ashi, Mashal de Rabbi Shemar Davar Daima. What is this compared to? L'adam mishamer pardes. Person is watching an orchard. Mishamer bebachotz kol mishtamer. If he guards it from the outside, then he's able to guard everything. But mishamrim bifnim, but he decides to guard it from halfway in. Shalafana mishtamer shalachavena mishtamer. He can only guard from that part and on. He won't be able to guard what's behind him. Rav Ashi bedusi. The Gemara says that Rav Ashi this mashal is not perfect because hasam shalafanav mishtamer. Now he's halfway in the orchard and he's watching only half of it. At least he's watching half of it. But hacha yilav shniya is paga be'er v'gufa. Over here, you're not even going to be able to keep half of it. If you're outside, you can watch the whole thing. That's the example. If you make a larger parameter of what you're protecting, then you protect everything. But if you come halfway in, then what's behind you won't watch. What's inside you will be able to watch. Gemara says, but over here, if you don't keep the shniyas, person will end up violating the arayas itself. So you're not even watching what's inside.
Zooming in, zooming out.
Yeah.
When you zoom out, you can see the whole thing.
Yeah. Okay, Rav Kana Amar Mehacho Shmartim Es Mishmarti. Rav Kana says from the following: you have to guard the guarding. Asu Mishmeres the Mishmarti. You should make a protection to the guarding. Amalei Abayla Rav Yosef Hadaraisi. You're quoting to me a pasuk. We're talking about rabbinic decrees. Are all those rabbinic decrees now deraisa? Gemara says deraisa pirsha rabbanan. Yeah, it's the original law is the Raisa that you have to do this. However, the rabbis interpreted what it is. So it's Kol HaTorah Nami Pirshei Rabbanan. The rabbis interpreted everything. Elamid Rabbanan across Machta Balma. No, the way it works is that the pasuk is not an actual prohibition telling me that you're not allowed to marry those people. It's telling me the pasuk is saying what it's saying. The rabbis are using the pasuk as a source, as an asmachta, as a support that they can do those decrees. Okay, the following Gemara is going to have 9 types of relatives that are shnias. It's very difficult to say this without a chart. So I made this chart here. So if you have it on your phone, good. Let me see. Should I put it on the screen? Give me a second and I'll try to add it to the screen. See, just 1 second. Do you have a phone?
No.
You want to take a picture of that and then that way you can at least look at it. Let me see if I can. The picture that I have, it's not so good.
Share screen.
Do a shared screen. Let's see.
I know they have 2 different books they have on all these pictures.
Let's try to do this. Give me 1 second. Share screen. Okay. I'll just give you a description of what we're doing here. Are you able to see? I don't even know what's going on over here. Are you able to see what I'm doing? Do you see this picture?
We see the picture, but it's very hard to decipher.
Okay, so let me you see the arrow, the cursor that I'm moving. Okay.
Yeah.
What we're doing here, if you have it on your phone, it's better I put it on the chat. But we're looking at this fellow in the box. He's in the center. Now, he has a father and a mother. And you want to come sit here? You want the paper? Yes, he has a father and a mother. He also has a wife. And his wife has a father and a mother. Now, what we're going to be looking at is all of that outer circle, because he also has, together with his wife, he also has a daughter, and he has a son, and the son is married, and they have a child, and then then the child is married, his grandson is married. So we're looking at that outer circle, and we're going to say that these outer relatives are secondary. So we'll go through each one. I'll leave it up here, and then we'll see. Let's start. Taner Rabbanan Mayim Shniyos. I put numbers, so it makes it a little easier. What are the secondary relationships? So Aim Imai. Number 1 is his mother's mother. His grandmother. Yeah.
Okay. It's number 1 there.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay. Now let's go to number 2. Be'im Aviv. His father's mother. That's also a grandmother. Okay. You see that, the number 2? Aim Aviv. Now, if you notice, there's arrows there because later on we're going to have a statement that actually continues up. Oh, I got it bigger. I didn't realize. Because that continues up forever. His mother's mother, it will continue up. And also over here, this father's mother would also continue up forever, at least rabbinically. Okay, the next one is number 3, Eishes Abi Aviv. The wife of his Eishes Avi Aviv, his grandfather's wife. which is not his mother. It's a separate wife. He had two wives. Okay. Eishes Avi Imai, his grandfather's other wife also. That's number 4. Eishes Achi Ha'av Min Ha'em. That means his uncle's wife. His uncle's wife. Min Ha'em. This is Eishes Achi Ha'av Min Ha'em. It's right here. I put a star. It's number 6. So his mother's half brother. That means that the father, his mother and his uncle have the same father. This uncle got married, and that wife would be forbidden to this fellow in the center. It's his aunt. Basically, it's his aunt. But it's his aunt, paternal brother. His mother and this brother are brother and sister, paternal brother and sister, and this is the wife of the brother. Eishes achi ha'em min ha'av. Now we have to go to the other side. Eishes achi ha'em. No, 1 second. Where's number 6? Oh, that was number 6. Oh, I made a mistake. So number 5 was Eishes achi ha'em min ha'av. Number 5 was over here. This was his father's brother's wife. That was an easy one. That was 5. Number 6 is over here. Is his mother's brother's wife. Now, the only thing that you need to catch here is that when I was dealing with the mother, I was looking at a paternal brother. When I'm dealing with the father, I'm looking at a maternal brother. Yeah, now that's going to be a confusing point, but it's actually very specific. And just to point it out, if you go to the actual, you see, this is his father over here. If you go to his grandfather, you go one step up. I made a line down to another fellow, which is Eishes Achi Ha'av Min Ha'av. This wife is actually not going to be an issue. She's going to be permitted. Which is interesting. Okay, where we're holding now? Kalas Benai.
You did 6, right?
I did 6. We're up to 7. His son's daughter-in-law. He has a son down. Now we're going down, and his son has a daughter-in-law. So that's it's not his granddaughter; it's his grandson's wife, Bekalas Bitai, and his daughter's daughter-in-law, which is not his granddaughter; it's his grandson's wife. Now, umuter adam be'eshes chamav. If his father-in-law has a second wife, and he divorced her, the father-in-law died, he's allowed to marry that woman. I put over here, there's like a, what's it called, a speech bubble? Put a speech bubble next to it without anything in it, as we'll see in the Gemara, because what you'll see in the Gemara. Ube'eshes chargai. He's also permitted with his stepson's wife. So his wife had a child from a previous marriage and had a son. The son got married. So that's Eishes Charge, that's his stepson's wife. If the son divorces her, this fellow in the center is allowed to marry, is not allowed to marry rabbinically, not allowed to marry rabbinically. But Asr Bebas Charge. However, his stepson's daughter, he's not allowed to marry, which is very odd. That the closer relationship, the wife he is, and the daughter, which is more distant, right? It's a third generation off, the second generation off, that becomes prohibited. Now, the reason for that is because that's his wife's granddaughter. But the wife is his wife's daughter-in-law.
His wife, so
Yeah.
she's okay, but the number 9.
Right. Now it says v'chargai, his stepson is mutter be'ishtai. I made a line over here. Permissible to this fellow's other wife, not to his mother, but to this, if this fellow in the center has another wife on the side, back on to the left, he can marry a second wife if this fellow dies or divorces her. Ubitai, and if he had a daughter from someone else, this stepson is allowed to marry this fellow's stepdaughter. No, it's not. It's not his stepdaughter. It's not related to him at all. It's the fellow's second wife's daughter. Yeah, it's not related to the stepson.
Who is that?
It's not talking about this fellow over here. This fellow here is allowed to marry this daughter.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's right. It's got a.
Basically, the fellow has two wives. One has a son and one has a daughter from previous marriages. They're not related at all. Okay. Okay, now we have the conversation. The wife of his stepson tells to him, Ani muteres lach, I can marry you. That's romantic. Ubiti asura lach, but my daughter can't. Okay. Yeah, surprising. Baschargai, the Gemara asks a question. Now, Baschargai deraisi. Why are you telling me that that's one of the shniyos? That's a biblical law. The ksiv es bas binav es bas bita. That's not a rabbinic law. That's a biblical law. He can't marry her granddaughter, his wife's granddaughter, or her granddaughter, which is from a son or from a daughter. The Gemara answers, Mishum the Kabbalah Mishneh Seifa Eshes Chargay Mereslai Ani Muteres Lach Biti Asur Lach Afagav the Biti Asur Lach Midaraisa B'Didi like Gazaber Rabbanan. You're right. There really is no number 9 over there, but because we wanted to point out that conversation, that's why we mentioned that as if that's. In other words, what we're pointing out is that there was no rabbinic decree on his stepson's wife. So therefore, Tanaration Nami Baschargai. So we also said the Baschargai. Okay. Ihachi, if that's the case, Jesus Chamav Nami Tema Ani Muteres Lach Biti Asur Lach Tavi Achis Ishtay. What about this woman up here? She can make the same comment. I left it blank because she didn't actually make the comment, at least in the Brisa. She says, empty speech bubble. She could say that I'm permissible to you. This is the second wife of his father-in-law. It's not his mother-in-law, but it's his father-in-law's other wife. He can say, I'm permissible to you, but my daughter, which I don't have here, I didn't put it on the chart, but my daughter is forbidden to you. Why? Oh, I did put it here, but I should have put that line to this one. If I would have made a line to that woman, you see, I should have made the line to that woman, another line, and then have another daughter. That would be so. But she's forbidden. So it says psikale halei psikale. That's obvious. Is obvious. We didn't have to say. Okay. Let's continue with the chart a little bit. There are 4 women that it actually stops. Only that woman is forbidden, but not any other one, not further up or anything like that. I put stars by them. So you see these little asterisks? I put these asterisks there, so you'll be able to see. Rabbi Yadei Tlas. Naked Rabbi Yadei Tlas. Rab had 3 of them. Even though he said there are 4. Eishes achi ha'em min ha'av. Achi ha'em, his mother's wife from the father. Eishes achi ha'em, achi ha'av. No, Eishes achi ha'em min ha'av. This one, this woman right here, only she's forbidden. But if it would have been Eishes achi ha'em min ha'em, if it would have came from the mother, in other words, this line over there is coming from, it's the father's son. It's his father-in-law's son. If it would have been his mother-in-law's previous son, it would have been mutter. Okay. Now let's go to this side. Over here, it's the mother-in-law's. Sorry, it's not his. Is this his mother-in-law? Who is this? This is his. It's not his mother-in-law. We're not dealing with that. We're dealing with his grandmother's son's wife. Yeah, which is his aunt. But specifically that aunt. Only that one would be permissible, would be forbidden. If it would be his grandfather's son's wife, that would be permissible. And also kalasai. And also his daughter-in-law stops. The Gemara is going to ask some questions on this. This is his daughter-in-law right here. You say that stops, but we'll see where the Gemara was going to ask, like, what's going on over there. It was the Iri Maisif, as the Iri adds af Eshes Avi Imai. Also, the wife of his grandfather. Let's see where she is. Yeah. Eshes, I put a star over here. What is that? This woman over here, his mother's father's other wife, doesn't continue up. Only she's forbidden. It's above Rav. What did Rav say? Rav said that his grandmother's father, his grandfather's son's wife was prohibited, only her, and Zeiri goes one above that says his grandfather's other wife is prohibited, only her. Rav, my time why doesn't Rav count it? He doesn't count this one as stopping, only there, Eshes Avi Imai, the other wife, because it's similar to Eshes Avi Aviv, another wife of his grandfather. Eshes Avi Aviv is this one over here. And he says this one would go up forever. Those are two similar. This grandfather's wife and this grandfather's wife are so similar, so he says that should continue rabbinically. The Iri says you can't compare one grandfather to the other grandfather. At this grandfather, he hangs out all the time because this is his father's father. But at his mother's father, that's not the family that they visit for Pesach. I don't know. Okay. Kalasai, the Gemara has a question. Kalasai Daraisa, what are you telling me that the daughter-in-law is considered a shniya that doesn't continue? Rav said that it's just her. What are you saying? We have a pasuk that says he can't marry his daughter-in-law. Okay, the Gemara says, we weren't talking about his daughter-in-law. That wasn't what Rav was talking about. Rav was talking about that he has a daughter and she has a daughter-in-law. Daughter has a son. That's forbidden as a shniya. Ema kalas benai. Why don't you say it's his son's daughter-in-law? It says kalas benai yesh la hefsek. Do you want to tell me that his son's daughter-in-law, it stops? Vatanya kalasai erva kalas benai shniya. V'cheinatem benai ben benai. It's a koladers. You can't say that because his son's daughter-in-law is also forbidden. Ela ema kalas pitai. Okay, so we say that it's his daughter's daughter-in-law. Daughter's daughter-in-law. Damar Rav Chizda, because Rav Chizda says, Hamilsim Migav Rabba Shmieli, this thing I heard from a great person, Umana Reb Ami, La Yasru Kala El Mipnei Kala. They only forbade a daughter-in-law because of a daughter-in-law. V'amali Kaldai, Milafana, stargazers told me, Milfana Havas Amina, V'amali Kaldai, Milafana Havas. You'll be a wise person. Amina, I thought like this. Igav Rabba Havina, if I'm going to be a great person, I'll be a sage. So Asbra Midaiti, I'll be able to figure out what Rabbi Ami was referring to. When he said that a daughter-in-law is forbidden because of a daughter-in-law. If I'm just going to be a teacher, that could also be a chacham. So Ashayla Mirabana Dasal Be Knishta, then I'll ask the sages that come into the base medrash where I'm teaching. They'll be hanging out over there. They'll have the answer. Hashta Savarta Midaiti, but turns out I figured it out. The decree of his daughter's daughter-in-law is only because of his son's daughter-in-law. And so therefore they forbade only that woman. Amalei Abaya L'Rava, Asberalach, I have an example for you. Gan Kalasa de Bei Bar Tzisoi. Apparently, in the house of Tzisoi, his son and his son's and his daughter's children all lived there. So it was his son's daughter-in-law in the house and his daughter's daughter-in-law in the house. And that's the pshat why there was an issue, because the son's daughter-in-law is a biblical prohibition and the daughter's daughter-in-law is rabbinic. Rav Papa can kalsa the Bei Rav Papa. Rav Papa says it's also the Bei Rav Papa Barabba. I have another example. The daughters-in-law of the Papa Barabba, they also lived in that house. Rav Ashim can kalasa the Bei Mari Barisik. Rav Ashi says it's like the daughter-in-laws in the house of Mari Barisik. He was a wealthy person. Okay. Let's take a look at the Gemara's question now, and then I'll take the thing off. The Gemara asks, Ibailu, as a question. Eishes achiha aim mina aim. Yeah. The mother's has a half brother from the mother, maternal half brother, and he's married to this woman. So it's basically his uncle's wife. But how is it at the uncle? It's from his maternal uncle. His mother's maternal brother, his wife. What's the halacha? If this would have been, I made a line over there. If this would have been his father's brother's wife from the mother, I know that that's a problem. And if it's ve'eshes achia ein mina av, and if it's the mother's brother's wife from the father, so dikatzarav, both of them have a father involved. The father, his father has a brother that has a wife, even though it's a maternal brother, but at least it's his father. His mother has a paternal brother that has a wife, but that at least it's paternal, it's from the father. So we understand who the gazer rabbanon. But if it's the mother's brother, maternal brother, there is no father there. Like gazer rabbanon, or maybe there's no difference. Okay, that was our question. Let's go back to learning the Gemara. Okay, Amar Rav Safra. Rav Safra says he gufa gzeira. Those themselves were only decrees. You want us to make a decree on a decree? You don't do that. Amar Rava atukulu lav gzeira linu. All of them. All the shniyas are decrees on decrees. Okay. And now we're going to go through how these decrees came about. Imai erva. His mother is forbidden from the Torah. Imai, his mother's mother, is a shniya. His mother's mother is rabbinic. The gazru al aim aviv, and they made a decree on his father's mother, his grandmother, mishum aim imai, because of his other grandmother. B'taimamai, what's the reason? Kulu de bei ima rabasi karle. All of them are called. How do they translate that? Bei ima rabasi, the house of the mother, of the greater, of the I guess the grandmother. They're both grandmothers. Eishes aviv erva, his father's wife is forbidden. So therefore, Eishes avi aviv is shniya. His grandfather's wife is a secondary prohibition. The gazru al Eishes avi imai mishum Eishes avi aviv. And now there's a decree on his grandfather's wife because of his other grandfather's wife, his paternal grandfather's wife. They're all called grandfathers. The wife of his uncle from his paternal uncle is prohibited. So therefore, is shniya. So his maternal uncle is also, the wife is prohibited. Because all of them are called uncles. Okay, so what's going to be the din by us, by this mother's brother's wife from the mother? If it would have been a girl, his mother's sister, it would have been prohibited. So if it's his mother's brother's wife, it's a secondary prohibition. Follow?
Yeah.
Okay. Va'amar Rava, uklalahu. Uklalahu. Is that a question or a statement? It's a question. That's how it has over here. Uklalahu. Chamaisai, his mother-in-law is a erva. But Eishes Chamav is muteres. But his father-in-law's second wife is permitted. Bas Chamaisai, which means his sister-in-law, his mother-in-law's daughter, which is a sister-in-law, is a erva, his wife's sister, right? But Eishes ben Chamaisai, but the wife of his brother-in-law, his mother-in-law's son's wife, muteres. Bas Chamav is a erva. His sister-in-law is prohibited. But Eishes ben Chamav is muteres. The wife of his brother-in-law is permitted. Chiragta is a erva. His wife's daughter is prohibited. But Eishes Charga is muteres. But his stepson's wife is permissible. Bas Chiragta is a erva. His stepson's daughter is prohibited. It's the granddaughter of his wife. But Eishes ben Charga is muteres. But the wife of his wife's grandson is permissible. Okay, so you have a problem. This statement of Rabbi Yehuda Bar Shila doesn't really fit. It says, Rabbi Yehuda Bar Shila, so what's it coming to tell me? It's coming to tell me exactly the case that the yeshiva asked before, which is his grandmother's brother's wife from the grandmother's maternal brother's wife, that she should be prohibited. What's the difference between those that you said wasn't a problem and this one that you're saying is? All of those needed two marriages in order to become relatives. But this one, there's only one marriage that makes him a relative. It's his uncle's wife. It's just one marriage apart. I know it's mother's son, but that's okay. Let's leave it over here.
Wait, so where did you leave it at?